Good afternoon to you. Happy first day of the 49ers off-season program. News continues to roll in, and I guess right now it's not as much news as it is stuff that we already knew, but anytime that you have a soft deadline like today, then some stuff perpetuates itself. And the fact of the matter is that Alex Mack is still undetermined about whether or not he's going to stay in the NFL for a 14th season. 36-year-old going on to age 37. Will he return for that year number 14 or not? Well, it's a big question for the 49ers because center is such an important position for them. And we're still waiting for the exact list of players, the photos that the 49ers release on day one of the offseason program of guys walking in from the parking lot so we can deduce who's in the building and who's not. We know Deebo Samuel won't be there for at least the on-field portion of stuff, so I wouldn't expect him to show up to the facility before contract. And we know that Jimmy Garoppolo is rehabbing elsewhere. But for me, and I said this in a video earlier this morning, one of the big questions is Alex Mack. Will he show up? Because he's obviously been contemplating retirement this offseason. I'm going to zoom out a little bit and say a couple things about this. If Alex Mack retires, the 49ers will have a critical hole to fill at the center position. Add this: even if Alex Mack doesn't retire, the 49ers have a critical hole to fill at the center position. The only difference between this, Alex Mack retiring, and this, Alex Mack not retiring, is a matter of timing. Again, Alex Mack turns 37 years old in November. He's about to enter NFL season number 14. He's an absolute Iron Man to have lasted as long as he has, with the durability track record that he has posted. So you have to start to think at some point this is not going to go as well from an availability perspective. And even then, Alex Mack is not the same type of player that he was just a few years ago when he was the NFL's center of the decade for the 2010s, a perennial All-Pro. He's still cerebrally is a very strong player. And athletically, I mean, the guy hustles. Remember that bomb that Jimmy Garoppolo threw to Deebo Samuel at the end of the first half against the Chicago Bears? That was, what, a 50-yard gain? The first player down the whole field for the 49ers was the 35, 36-year-old who was right around his birthday, was Alex Mack. Sprinting downfield, hustling. Kyle Shanahan jokes around that he calls Alex Mack the golden retriever because he's so just spry. And the football's 50 yards downfield. Alex Mack, even at nearly 300 pounds, he's going to be the first one running down there, and he's going to be the first one ready to snap the ball in a 2-minute drill type setting. So I don't think he played like he was 35 or 36 this past season, but he obviously isn't in his physical prime anymore. But boy, the guy hustles. The guy's such an important part of what the 49ers do. So even if he doesn't retire, the 49ers have a critical hole to fill because they have to start making a future projection. They have to sit down and say, hey, we need to make sure that we're set at this position moving forward. That's how important center is. I'm going to put this article up on the screen just so we can get a picture of Alex Mack and obviously Daniel Brunskill. It's another question mark. What are the 49ers going to do at right guard? Mack obviously works in tandem a lot with that right guard position. I think the presence of Mack helped both 49ers guard spots this past season. I mean, we've seen the importance of the spot over several years for the 49ers because they went out and tried to sign Weston Richburg to huge money. Injury issues were a big deal there. They eventually led to his retirement. And essentially, we have a delineation. When the 49ers have had competent center play, they have been a functional offense. When they've had sketchy backup center play, it's been a sketchy backup natured offense, right? It's been hit or miss. And I talked to Chris Dalman, and this is Chris Dalman, number 67 last year. Son Drew got drafted from Stanford to the Atlanta Falcons. And Chris Dalman used to play center for the 49ers. He was a guard and center for the 49ers under Bob McKittrick, legendary late offensive line coach. And Chris Dalman has coached at many levels of football. I think really all levels of football, you could say. He coached under Harbaugh at Stanford. He's coached in the NFL. And he's also coached for the Salinas High School, the high school down there in Salinas. So he knows his football. He knows his X's and O's. And obviously, having played in the NFL, having played at Stanford, Having played multiple positions along the offensive line, Chris Dalman knows about the evolution of the center position and its responsibilities. When I talked to Chris last year expressly about his son, Drew, who was a center at Stanford, then the center position in the NFL, I mean, the guy was just a fountain of knowledge, talking about the fact that the center has to get down in that three-point stance. He has to identify safety rotations downfield. So think about how hard that is. You have big 320-plus pound nose tackles getting ready to rush against you. So you're going to have to anchor against those guys. You're going to have to try to maul them in the pass game. You have the middle linebacker moving around in front of you. And then you have another layer of defense beyond that. And those are the safeties. And those guys are rotating. And the safety rotations will often give away what exactly the defense is doing, or at least give you an idea of tendency. And the center, whose job is to set the entire offensive line, needs to pay attention to those safety rotations. So while that center is ready to snap the ball, when his hand's down on the ball, he's down in his crouch, he's got to have his head up, and he's got to point out safety rotations. He has to notice what's happening, not on the first level with those 320-pounders getting ready to combat him one-on-one, not on the second level, the Mike linebacker trying to move this way and that, but on the third level, the center is the one that has to diagnose what's going on. So centers have to be extremely, extremely intelligent. They have to be able to process very quickly. And then on top of that, they have to do everything from an athleticism and a strength standpoint that an interior offensive lineman has to do to handle some of these powerful defensive tackles in the game. So let's not discount how important center is, especially in an offense like Kyle Shanahan's that puts so much pressure on the position. And that means that the 49ers absolutely have to figure out, even if Alex Mack does play this year, have to figure out what the future plan at that position will be. I have a couple names. One is Cam Jurgens. He's the center from the Nebraska Cornhuskers. And then Cole Strange, who I wrote about today, from Chattanooga. In fact, Cole Strange, that's the same college as Terrell Owens went to. There hasn't been a top 5 round draft pick from Chattanooga since 1996 when the 49ers picked Terrell Owens in the 3rd round. So that ended up working well. Good pick, right? T.O. in the 3rd round of 96. Chattanooga looking to produce another NFL prospect. Well, Cole Strange might be one of those guys. And speaking of T.O., one of the guys that was his teammate was Chris Dalman, who's up on that screen right now. I'm sure T.O. played in that game. It looks like Monday Night Football against the Denver Broncos in 1997. You can correct me if I'm wrong, and you're a 49ers historian, but it was a big deal. Or maybe 98. 97 or 98. One of those 2 years they played the Broncos on Monday Night Football. But the white pants lead me to believe that it was 1997 for the 49ers. Could have been a preview of the Super Bowl if Jerry Rice didn't crack his patella in that game. Coming back in record speed from an ACL tear, Jerry Rice got hurt in Monday Night Football. It was a resounding win over the eventual NFL Super Bowl champion Denver Broncos, coached by Mike Shanahan. Unfortunately for the 49ers, Jerry Rice would be done for the season, and the 49ers couldn't get past the Green Bay Packers in the NFC Championship game at a rainy, wet Candlestick Park. Anyway, that's enough about Chris Dalman. More about who the 49ers might draft moving forward. Cam Jurgens, Cole Strange. Those are 2 of my favorite center prospects. Now, there are other names in the draft, of course. Those are just 2 that I've written about. Cole Strange, just to give you an example of versatility, it's a guy who's expected to go around the 3rd round. He played Mike linebacker in high school. He played defensive end in high school. He moved to college at Chattanooga, and he started playing offensive tackle. He played guard. And finally, now he's at center. So here's a guy who, since high school, has played at 5 different positions. 2 of those positions have been on the other side of the ball on defense. And one of them was the quarterback of the defense and the Mike linebacker. Now, as a center, the guy who's at the NFL level especially is going to have to play constant chess matches with opposing defenses. I think that Mike linebacker experience is special, is relevant, and potentially helpful, even if it did come at the high school level. So that's why I really like Cole Strange out of Chattanooga, besides the fact that it'd be cool if the 49ers broke that draft drought from Terrell Owens. But I will say this, the 49ers haven't yet adequately addressed their offseason offensive line issues. And, it causes me to wonder, are they not sure what Alex Mack's status would be? Have they been kind of frozen in time? Are they overconfident in some of their rookies who are going to be going into second years, like Aaron Banks and Jalen Moore? Are they overconfident in Dan Brunskill? Do they believe that his abilities at the right guard position are good enough, even though his metrics were below average there across the board this past season? Those questions I can't firmly answer. I could just sit here and speculate, but I do believe that the 49ers have a lot of questions on the offensive line, and I put them down here on the screen below me. Left tackle, Trent Williams. Obviously, I don't put a question mark by the names of one of the best players in football. Yes, the 49ers are set there. They paid for it last offseason. Williams is commanding a record amount of money, but he deserves that, and the 49ers look good at left tackle. But left guard, vacuum, right? Laken Tomlinson left to the New York Jets. So what do the 49ers do there? Well, at some point, you have to have your draft picks produced. So maybe Aaron Banks slots into that left guard position. That seems to be what the 49ers are planning on. And boy, that plan better work, because if it doesn't, you're in a world of hurt, because you're already sketchy at right guard. And now center's a big fat question mark, because we're still waiting on Alex Mack. Now, Shanahan and Lynch have indicated they think it's more likely than not that Mack does come back to the 49ers based on how he's been working out. But we're still waiting to see who actually showed up here on this first day of OTAs. And if Mack hasn't showed up, and it's not OTAs, it's the voluntary offseason workouts. OTAs start in a month on May 23rd. But if Mack doesn't show up for any of this offseason program, he, is foregoing a $100,000 workout bonus, which I get it. He's made millions over his career, but that's not insignificant. And the longer this lasts with uncertainty, the more, you can start comparing it to a Joe Staley-like situation from a couple years ago. And in that situation, the 49ers went out and traded for Trent Williams. And that was a really good deal, because now Williams is on a record contract with them, holding down that left tackle spot. But is there a move to be made that's like that for the 49ers? Maybe. Former Brown center J.C. Tretter, who's a free agent, is still out there. And tell you what, center, I talk about the responsibilities and Chris Dalman being a really smart guy, and all these centers having to mentally grasp what's going on to make the appropriate reads and the appropriate calls. Tretter and Mack, it's funny to me. Mack is the NFLPA's treasurer, was just reelected a couple months ago to continue serving in that role. And J.C. Tretter is the NFLPA's president. And to me, it's no surprise that these two highly intelligent offensive linemen are on the NFLPA's board as the treasurer and the president, and have been so successful in the league. Now, Tretter's a bit younger than Mack. He's 31, will go on 32 years old at his next birthday. But, he's no spring chicken, but I think he's still a capable player. And I think, given the fact that he was in Kevin Stefanski's system, that he could be somebody that fits the 49ers mold well, who knows the offense. I think he'd immediately be the Trent Williams in this situation, or at least the candidate to be the Trent Williams in this situation to Joe Staley or Alex Mack's retirement. So I'd look in that direction, but I would also just point out that that center position is not easy to cerebrally replace. And even if you do go to a rookie, it's tough to project if a guy like Cole Strange is going to be able to handle the NFL workload up front, right? As far as the intellectual aspect of the center position, at least immediately. Rookies are rookies for a reason, because they have to learn the tricks of the trade. They have to learn the cerebral part of the game. And the one benefit that you have from a veteran like Alex Mack in there is that he absolutely has mastered that side of the game. And I think J.C. Tretter has as well. So when you look at your draft prospects, Jurgens and Strange are two of the top centers on my list. It's all projection, though, for how quick can they adapt to the NFL level as far as being able to perform at that all-important center spot up here, because up here is going to be really, really important at the position. So we continue waiting to see if Alex Mack shows up, and the 49ers, they've got a critical hole to fill. Even if he doesn't, that center position has to be taken care of, because I didn't even finish going through the offensive line here. Brunskill, Jalen Moore, right guard. I don't know. I put a question mark there because Brunskill wasn't great at the position last year. I know that they've tendered him, but I'm waiting to see if the 49ers can actually spruce up their offensive line on the interior through this upcoming draft, through whatever other signings they make, so they can get Brunskill back in a utility offensive line role. And McGlinchey, until he's back out there playing another game, I know we saw a good workout video from him last week, but torn quads are torn quads. Those are serious business. So we shouldn't assume that Mike McGlinchey is going to be 100% ready to go at right tackle till we actually see him out on the field. So long story short is that's a lot of question marks, and that means the 49ers haven't yet adequately addressed their needs along the O-line this offseason, and that's absolutely something that they must do moving forward, and the challenge will become even more daunting if Alex Mack does indeed retire. And again, right now, we're not sure. It's a big question mark, and maybe Alex Mack isn't sure either. Just got married in Ireland. Maybe he's ready for that next chapter. Maybe he wants to get in one more year. It's all a big shrug, a big emoji shrug at this point for Mack and the 49ers. All right, questions from you. Mike has a good point. Maybe Brunskill ends up at center. Yes, he did a decent job there as a fill-in in 2020. So you move Brunskill from right guard to center. Then your leader in the clubhouse, at least right now, to start at right guard would be Jalen Moore. Leader in the clubhouse to start at left guard would be Aaron Banks. Would you be confident with that offensive line if you're a 49ers fan? Trent Williams from left to right. Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, Daniel Brunskill at center, Jalen Moore at right guard, and Mike McGlinchey at right tackle. I mean, I guess you'd have somewhat of a ceiling if you believe that Jalen Moore could really improve and that Aaron Banks obviously could really improve at left guard. But yes, Daniel Brunskill was better at center than he was at right guard in 2020. So maybe you could stay afloat there. I just see it as a collection of moves that would be a little too close to treading water for me. I think the 49ers need to get better up front. I don't think that treading water is enough. So I do think they need to bring in some more talent. That's why I mentioned J.C. Treader's name being that free agent. And that's why I've mentioned some of these names in the draft. Brendel would probably start or sign a vet at center. Jake Brendel is a player that the 49ers have been impressed with ever since training camp of last year. He made the 53-man roster, which might have been a surprise to some. So maybe he's a guy that can slot into a starting role. But again, boy, this is such an important position that's been so heavily correlated with 49ers wins and losses under Shanahan. You don't want to screw around with the center position. So even if Brendel has impressed them, he'd have to be a plus center for the 49ers to not tread water, to get better over the course of this offseason. Now, we're not allowed in team facilities at this portion of the offseason, only when we're invited in. So we'll be invited in on, and it's always when you're invited in. That's nothing special. You're invited in during the regular season, but the invites at this point of the year are fewer and farther between. So facility for us next Monday. We were in there last Wednesday. And then after that, we'll be there every day of the draft. And then after that, we'll be there for OTAs. And then after that, we'll have our July break. And then we'll be there for the regular season. Okay, what's the news? Is he retiring or is this just speculation? No, there is no news really with Alex Mack. The news, there was a headline that he was still undecided, which isn't news because the last we reported was that he was undecided. So until there's a report that he isn't undecided, he remains undecided. So that's just the gist of the matter right now. We're waiting to see who reports and who doesn't to the 49ers voluntary program today. That might give us some clues moving forward. But for now, we just need to continue emphasizing that the 49ers haven't done enough yet this offseason to address their issues along the offensive line. It's not to say that they've been asleep at the switch. They might have a plan that centers on the draft, and there still is plenty of talent acquisition opportunities ahead. But at the time being, I don't think the 49ers have done enough up front, and this uncertainty regarding Alex Mack illuminates that. All right, everybody can take a look at that article. I will put up one more comment. If Banks develops, the demise of the offensive line is greatly exaggerated. True, but he hasn't developed yet. He's got to show something as soon as – the offensive line has cost the 49ers 2 playoff games. There are only 2 playoff losses over the past 3 years. It's been mainly issues at right guard on the interior. Mack did a good job last season plugging a hole, but that right guard spot, it was brutal against the Rams. It was brutal against the Chiefs and Chris Jones. I don't think the demise of the offensive line has been exaggerated. I think it's been an Achilles heel for this team in pass protection, and the 49ers must improve it. So if Banks does come through, great for the 49ers. Yes, that should be the status quo. Your first and second round picks should come through, and we'll see if they do in this case. Because if they don't, you start to be in worlds of trouble, and you could see why through how the 49ers have built the roster. It's really the only way to build the roster in this salary cap era. Yeah. And you say that the offensive line had nothing to do with the 3 and outs in the fourth quarter. Garoppolo got drilled over and over again in the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl. It's all connected, guys. It's a team sport. And the 49ers certainly weren't good enough at the right guard position against Chris Jones. They weren't good enough against Aaron Donald, especially against the Rams. The 49ers against the Rams in that NFC title game, the last drive against the Rams, complete hopelessness because they couldn't block Donald. It was just like the Bengals who couldn't block Aaron Donald. Very same thing happened on the very same field against the very same player 2 weeks apart. The offensive line for the Bengals crumbled just like the offensive line for the 49ers crumbled. What did the Bengals do? Well, they said, oh, well, we better go out and protect Joe Burrow. They signed a bunch of guys. We know that's not how the 49ers roll. That's why I've been criticizing them because I don't think they've been doing enough up front. But I'm also realistic, and I try to gauge how the 49ers do operate as a franchise, how they might try to develop players, how they might bring some guys in. And I want to wait until the draft passes, and I want to wait until I know what this Alex Mack retirement news will be before I jump to any crazy conclusions. But at some point, we're going to get to those conclusions. And we have some breaking offensive line news. I'm going to read it to you guys right now. It looks like something with Daniel Brunskill. It just popped across my screen. Here it is. The 49ers have announced that Daniel Brunskill and Jauan Jennings have each signed their 1-year tendered contracts. So let's put this on Twitter because I have a couple thoughts to give right away on this. One is it doesn't appear that the 49ers got a long-term deal done with Jauan Jennings, but they have him back. They really didn't have a choice for this 2022 season. So go ahead and follow me on Twitter because I'm about to tweet this right now, and you just have to give me a second. Jauan Jennings and Daniel Brunskill are both officially back with the 49ers for 22. Each player has signed his 1-year tender. And I'm going to put this up on the screen right now for those who are watching. I always love when news comes while we're on the show. Always good stuff. Because we got some viewers on now. We might as well just keep the momentum going. So go to the banners here. Let more people join. Jauan Jennings and Daniel Brunskill have officially signed with the 49ers for 2022. Boom. There we go. It's up on the screen. And how well does this work out? Daniel Brunskill was up on the screen while we got news of Daniel Brunskill re-signing with the 49ers. So a couple things. Daniel Brunskill was a restricted free agent. So the 49ers tendered him. He could have, at the lowest level, he could have gone around and seen, if there were offers from other teams that would beat the 49ers offer, they would have the right of first refusal if that were the case. Obviously, there weren't offers that exceeded that. So Daniel Brunskill will be back with the 49ers at a price tag of $2.43 million for this year. So I think that's a fair price for Daniel Brunskill. At this point, I would slot him in as a starter along the offensive line. He's a versatile player. But again, I think one of the big keys for the 49ers is to get Daniel Brunskill into a utility role. That's where he was at his best in 2019 and 2020. Did a good job filling in at both left and right tackle, and then later at guard in 2019 and at center in 2020. He's done a worse job starting at right guard. So I think that Brunskill has to be as the former tight end. He can move. He's more of an athletic kind of guy than a mauler, right? Because of the size, because he is coming at this from a tight end angle. I think that Daniel Brunskill is a player who should be displaced out of a starting spot by talent acquisition in an ideal world. And then he could really contribute to you at one of those swing tackle spots, right? He could really contribute to you as a potential depth piece at center. And hey, maybe he has to play center if the 49ers don't get JC Treader and if Alex Mack does retire. But for Daniel Brunskill, it's $2.43 million. For Jauan Jennings, well, it's going to be $825,000. He signed his exclusive rights free agent tender. And at $825,000, that's a steal. Jauan Jennings is obviously a dog. I mean, this guy, I mean, he pisses off the opposing team. He holds on to the football. He knows how to block, and he sets a tone. And then he has an infectious personality off the field that is reminiscent a little bit of what Kendrick Bourne brought the 49ers. But we've long sung Jauan Jennings' praises. that was a player who I thought the 49ers, and probably because it took Jennings a little bit longer to sign his exclusive rights free agent tender, he was in a situation where he couldn't even negotiate with other teams. So the fact that it took a while for Jauan Jennings to sign makes me think that the 49ers might have been holding out for a longer-term deal, and Jennings might have been holding out for a longer-term deal. It might have been amenable to both sides to get something like that done so they don't have to go back to the negotiating table next year. But at this rate now, the 49ers will have to come back to the negotiating table next year with Jauan Jennings because they only signed the one-year tender with him, or he only signed the one-year tender with them for $825,000. And I guess both sides signed the contracts. The 49ers signed with Jauan Jennings, and Jauan Jennings signed with the 49ers. They have Brunskill back in the fold too. Two expected pieces of news. We never didn't expect either of these guys to be on the roster, but also cool that it happened while we were live on the show. Anyway, I'm going to go tweet a little bit about this, so go ahead and follow me on Twitter. I'll write a little bit about it too. This has been a show about Alex Mack, and while the show about Alex Mack started with that uncertainty, we end it with certainty that Daniel Brunskill, at least, maybe a piece of that center position, will be back. So cool stuff, cool timing. Everybody subscribe to the channel. We'll talk to you all soon.